You know, I think one of the comments, Anime Otaku, was right in that I should. My last Overwatch video wasn't great. It was mostly, and I felt it too when I was just like talking about how frustrated I was with sort of format changes that don't really address like the problems. So maybe I'll just go back to addressing the problems. And like one of the big issues in Overwatch for a lot of people is Widowmaker, and for myself included. There are certain games I've had where it feels like the Widow shuts down the entire game. And a problem with that is I also wanted to make another video on the unintended consequences of change when it comes to balance, where because they messed up Sombra, they made Widow and Ball worse. Because then all of a sudden, Widow, which was already a problem, but at least could be kept in check by a Sombra, like you didn't have to have the clicking on head skill. Cause like if you have the clicking on head skill, you can shut down a lobby. But if there's another person on your team that also has the clicking on head skill, they kind of cancel each other out. But when you don't have that, then you like such as myself, I can't play Widowmaker. Despite the fact that I've made it to high elo, I cannot play Widowmaker at that level. And I don't want to. It's just not my playstyle. Sombra is my playstyle though, where I have to get in there and I have to be a little bit more tricky about how I use my abilities versus my mechanical aim. Uh, Nerfing and getting rid of Sombra's perma invis and sort of just gutting the character made it so Widowmaker became completely uncontestable. Um, and a lot of the problems for Widowmaker are actually a lot more complicated than it seems. It's not as simple as just nerfing Widowmaker, in my opinion, because there's three problems with Widow. Um, the first one is uh, her her overall kit, right? Like in the hands of someone who's not good at Widow, she can feel totally useless. In the hands of someone who is good at Widow, it feels the most oppressive thing in the world. Um, the other thing is level design. Um, that one is a problem because of the fact that Widowmaker is extremely oppressive on a map like Circuit Royale or Gibraltar, right? But she's not really talked about when you get to like Li Jiang or when you would play any of the Clash modes, right? Like there are certain maps where Widow for sure shuts you down, and then there's certain maps where she's not really as relevant because it doesn't really complement her kit. Uh, so that's the other thing I want people to remember is that Widowmaker, although powerful, is not powerful in every scenario, even to the players who are good at her. Because even they would prefer to play a Tracer or a Cassidy on Li Jiang versus Widowmaker, right? So the problems are not just her kit. And the third one, which I've made a video on before, is it's just player knowledge. Like, um, I I I talked about this in another video where I got blamed as the tank for not dealing with the Widowmaker, and one of the problems that I've seen with people is that they don't understand how to play against a Widowmaker. And this causes a lot of issues in that if you peek a Widowmaker 3 or 4 times and then you get headshot, that's on you. And a lot of it too is just the positioning and knowing where to stand when that happens. So the question is, how do we educate players on how to play around this and where to go? Because there are things that you can do to play around a Widowmaker, but most people are so used to sort of being bailed out that uh from like other attacks or other enemies. Like if you take a little bit of damage from a Cassidy, you can get healed by a support or Suzu or pulled. Uh Widow, if she sees you make a mistake from far away, it's much easier and safer for her to capitalize on that mistake, even if it takes her multiple times, right? Like one of the things that I do in my playstyle for any game, whether it be Marvel Rivals or Overwatch, is I play those characters like Tracer, Sombra, Psylocke that have tricky mind games. And what I'll do is I'll peek one way, shoot, get their attention, and then peek around and go the opposite way Because a lot of times what players do is they'll take the duel and they'll turn, shoot, go back around the corner, reload, go back on over and shoot. And the moment that you go back around the corner again, she just pops you in the head. Why? Crosshair's already lined up. She's waiting for you to take that duel again because a lot of people ego check her and then get mad when they get shot in the head. So that's the third one. Um, a lot of these things I'm not going to address right here, but I do think it's important to bring up because of the fact that one of the things I've noticed while playing Marvel Rivals is there's a lot of different ways to go. There's a lot of different ways to move around. Whereas in Overwatch, a lot of times there's like one major choke point that you're trying to like go through, like on Eichenwald, and there's not a whole lot of ways around. Same for like Circuit Royale, right? Like if you come out of the spawn at Circuit Royale, the payload goes like this, I think, right? And then you have this long sight line that you have to go down. And there's not really a whole lot of ways when there's a Widowmaker back here who has free sight to shoot at anybody who comes through. And assuming that all your team does is just hold space and gives the Widowmaker time, she can shut down that entire lane. And then even if you get past that lane, then you have this one and up here in this area to like go through, especially because they have the high ground here and she has free sights, and she can kind of keep backing up to the next long sight after another. A lot of these levels have a problem in that there's just not a lot of options to deal with the widow. Like if you play those characters that aren't great at range, but widow is, and you don't give players options in terms of how to get around to close that gap, they're going to feel that frustration. So Widowmaker is a complicated problem in that scenario where it's not as simple as just like you nerf the hero and everything will be fine. Uh, because I don't think that there's necessarily a problem with like a one shot hero, uh, even in games. Because like even Hanzo Widow, like I actually don't have a problem with getting one shot in games. Even when I was Tracer and I got one shot by like a May Icicle, dying in games is not bad. It's when you feel like there's nothing you could have done to also kill them that it feels frustrating. So if I close the gap on a sniper, they should be weak, right? Hanzo to me can have a one shot, and same Quinn Widow can have a one shot. The thing is like once you close that gap, they should be weak. Um, so what you need to do is give people options in how to close that gap. Um, and whether that be through the level or whether that be through other heroes like Sombra, like you need to make sure that players have options available. So that being said, still like this is a video about the kits and how to improve and fix them. So let's get into that first, and not first. Let's get into talking about that, so that way there's still other things that might be able to be done in order to sort of change her kit around that might make it a little bit less frustrating. But hopefully Blizzard can adjust some of the other things. And as for educating the player base, I believe I'll make another video one day about how that could be done through like how that could have been done through PvE and still could. But let's talk about her kit. Her basic rifle. Now, right now, currently, it one shots at a distance, right? Black Widow in Marvel Rivals doesn't one shot, and people have still found ways to make her work. I think that reverting or changing it to where she can't one shot, but she can fire a bit more freely and do damage similar to like Black Widow. I think that that could still work, depending on like how frequently she can shoot. So uh, let's how do you put this? No more one shot. Let's see, fire more frequently, maybe. Oh, fire fixed rate, because that charge up time, is sort of inconsistent. If it was just fixed bolt action similar to Marvel Rivals, and here's the thing: people are going to be like, "Oh, well, isn't that copying Marvel Rival?" Everybody copies each other in the game industry when it comes to design. Everybody just takes ideas that work and they just kind of work with it. I realize when watching this back that it might be a little confusing. I don't mean work exactly like it does in Marvel Rivals, but rather keep the SMG when she's zoomed out, but when she's scoped in, have a more fixed rate. That's where I would want to start. So that way it still feels Widowmaker to Overwatch, but also has a change to where it's no longer including that one shot. Anyway, back to the video. But that would sort of take away Widow's one shot, one kill hero fantasy, and I'll get to that later. But this also, what I would do is say that, like, up at like a closer range, like she has fall off, right? She has worse fall off now, but she can fire at a more fixed rate. But the closer she plays, the more damage that she can deal, right? So, uh, uh, more damage closer. So that way, if I'm playing Tracer and I close the gap on a Widow, she's at a disadvantage for sure. But if she flick shots and hits me in the head, she can still kill me, right? I think that's fair because of the fact that those shots are still really hard to hit. But it puts her more at risk, where it's just like, okay, well, now you have an option. What are you going to try and do? Are you going to try and get closer to do more damage, but put yourself at greater risk? Or are you going to stay farther back and just kind of do more consistent damage that's safer? Now you have options. Like, yeah, there's still the possibility of getting one shot up close, but high risk, high reward, right? That's where we're going with this. The grappling hook, um, this one's fine. This one will stay just how it is. It's perfectly fine. Her ability to reposition is useful. Never had an issue with it. Venom Mine is lame. Nobody really uses it, right? It's not really a beneficial ability. Now, what I would do to change it is, because of the fact that it's still in the cinematic, I still kind of like how it is just change what it does or give it double charges. Like, um possible 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 two charges. Um so you could plant multiple to sort of cover your back, and also actually make not just like a toxic gas that like does damage over time and like reviews you through walls, like make it so it actually sort of disorients, um like disorients the player, so that way it's sort of like in the cinematic where as Tracer goes through and she starts to get sort of like disoriented, like play an effect on screen so that way it's like, oh, you can't fully see what's going on. Because realistically, most people don't get hit by this very often, but when they do get hit by it, it should be a little bit more rewarding, right? You should try and find ways to make that ability a bit more useful, and making it a bit stronger so that way it's not entirely reliant on just like the one shots. Um, and then we get to her ultimate. This is where it comes back, where let's say she hits Q and now she's got her one shot at a distance brought back, right? She still has to hit the shots, but now she's got greater power, but is put into her ultimate. And depending on like how fast that charges will depend on how fair it is, but like, um, one shot, one kill, and like how long it lasts, etc. Right? But this is where I think like ultimates should be strong because of the fact that uh like ultimates should amplify what you already do. Like in Overwatch, to me, the ones that are the best are the ones that just amplify what you do, but you still need to execute on them. Um, so giving her the ability to be like powered up, in which she at a range could still one shot, one kill people in a clutch moment, I think is important because the infrared sights um, is a relatively weaker ultimate in terms of like it gives her an advantage, but it's not like the strongest ultimate in the game. It's not really where her power lies. Her power lies in her basic firing capabilities. So you take away power from the basic firing capabilities and you put it back into the ultimate. And now all of a sudden it shifts to where it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm less afraid of her during the match from a range, but I'm more afraid when she gets her ultimate. When you hear her use her ultimate, like one shot, one kill, and maybe you hear a powered up rifle shot hit someone in the head, you're like, okay, like play safe. I have to wait the next 12 seconds out or be mindful of her position, right? Because a lot of times with good Widowmakers, you don't really know what's happening when you die to a Widowmaker until it's too late. And there are some that just hit those shots perfectly. There are some Widowmakers that can shut down a lobby. Um, but once again, like the problem with Widowmaker is a lot more complicated in that it's not just one thing, right? You can't just be like, we're going to take away her one shot and that'll make it better because she's such a mediocre character any other time that eh, I understand why the devs would be hesitant to change a lot of things, especially given the fact that like snipers are a staple to FPS games. Um, but that doesn't mean that they have to have like they all have to like play the same. Uh, I think that putting the power like giving players choice on both ends to where you give Widow uh options to shoot from afar, shoot up close, but also put more power into the ultimate. I think overall, like this would satisfy both like the Widow players and the people going up against her. But uh, I do think as well for Overwatch, a lot of the levels need to be changed in order to make it so there's options and how to close that gap as characters who normally can't, or places to hide that she can't see, right? Positioning, and where to stand. Um, and the third one, like with player knowledge, uh, that one is that one's a bit tougher, but I do think that there is a huge gap in terms of uh, educating the players on how to play the game. And now, granted, like when Overwatch first came out, there was no like method, right? But now it's been out so long that there's people, like awkward who legitimately have, you know, communities that are all about basically paying someone to teach you how to play the game. Like to me, why would you not want to jump on that and sort of create that in game so that way, there's clearly a market for it. There's clearly people who want to learn how to play the game better. But to me, that shouldn't be done through content creators. Like it's cool that content creators are doing it, but it should be done through game and educating people through games. So that way the problems of low elo aren't like, oh, well, these characters are oppressive. The problem is, how do I learn how to play against these characters? How do I get to that high elo? Because a lot of people, whether they, you know, uh, want to train how to get better or use cheats to get better or just buy an account that's higher up, people want to be in high elo. You just need to teach them how to do that. And part of like what could help with Widowmaker, along with level design and kit changes, is just educating the player base on how to play around her kit. Because for me personally, it's not that I've never had a Widowmaker that's been like oppressive or difficult to deal with. There have been for sure, like really good Widowmakers, especially when they're damage boosted by a Mercy. But uh, it's more so like I know how to position around her well enough that it's actually quite rare that I ever actually had a problem with Widow specifically, because of the fact that I'm like, I am constantly checking and being like, I'm going to attack this person, but I know that there's a Widow back there up on this corner. So I'm going to shoot at this tank from behind this wall here because I know I can apply pressure to this person safely and that she can't see me. Right. But that's what I'm thinking. But my ally, who's like, I'm going to walk out in front and just start shooting the tank and then gets clipped in the head, is just like, we need something to deal with the Widow. It's like, no, you need to not stand in that location. Um, but yeah, uh, I think there's a lot that can be done. I think that I would start first with changes to her kit in this way and see where it goes. Because I think Black Widow in Marvel Rivals has taught us that uh, there are ways to remove the one shot but keep the sniper fantasy and still have it play in a healthy way for the game. Because getting one shot in a game when it feels like you don't have any options, it just sucks. But at the very least, uh, in Rivals, it with the way the levels are and how you can get around and all the other heroes, like it at least feels like there's options in which you can play against it. And in Overwatch, they're cursed with the fact that their levels benefit Widow really, really well at some times, and by changing Sombra, they inadvertently made Widowmaker way too powerful. Um, so yeah, combination of changing her, there's a whole lot of other lists I would, list of changes I would do. But anyway, that's my overall spiel on fixing Widowmaker. If you like this idea, let me know. If you play Widowmaker and this still seems reasonable to you, let me know. Because once again, when I make these videos where I'm talking about how I would fix or rework a hero, I really want to hear from the people who play the heroes, as especially to make sure that like it doesn't just satisfy the people who want the character, you know, nerfed. Usually, it satisfies the people who really want to maintain that same hero fantasy, but also play fair on the other end. Um, so yeah, if you're a Widowmaker player, please let me know your thoughts.